The shilling was thin and warm, and had been in 3 other pockets already that morning, and it was the last money Hester Crowle would be allowed to touch for 365 days. She closed her hand around it at 20 minutes past 11 on the 11th of November, 1800, standing in the servants' line in the marketplace at Nether Wrenhale with a straw in her hat, because that was what you did, and with an order for her own removal folded flat inside her left shoe. Up and down the line the other women had put out a token to show what they were: a tuft of cow hair, a wooden spoon, a scrap of new thatch. Hester had nothing, because there is no token in England for what she was, and if there had been one, it would have been half a mile long. "Miss Crowle," said Mr. Ambrose Skeet, who had been standing at her elbow for a quarter of an hour without speaking, in the way of a man who wants to be seen standing there. "Mr. Skeet, you know I must ask you to say it out loud. I know it. Then say it out loud, if you please, so that these people can hear you. Because I will be asked at the sessions whether you said it, and I would rather answer yes." So Hester Crowle said it out loud in the marketplace, in a flat voice, with 60 people listening and pretending not to. "I am hired for the year," she said. "I am hired from this day, being Martinmas, the 11th of November, 1800, to the 11th of November, 1801, at 50 shillings for the year, and my meat, drink, washing, and lodging, to serve His Grace the Duke of Wrenhale, and to do whatever I am bid about his house, his yard, and his grounds. I am not hired to make rope. I am not hired to any particular work at all. Louder. I am not hired to any particular work at all," said Hester, "and I will take no other wage from any person, and no gift, and no relief, and no manner of money whatsoever, from this day until the 11th of November, 1801, and if I do, I lose the year." Mr. Skeet wrote it down, and closed the book and put the book under his arm, and looked at her with an expression that no one who was watching could read, and that Hester read exactly, because she had been reading it off men in a rope walk since she was 12. It was not hate, it was patience. 365 days, said Mr. Skeet. 365 days, said Hester Crowle. It has never once been done in this parish, he said. I have gone back in the book to 1740, and I have found 9 attempts and no completions. And I keep the book, so I would know. A year is not a long time to think about. It is a long time to be. Something always happens. I am aware of that too, said Hester. The Duke of Wrenhale had come down the line by then, and was standing 4 feet away with his hat in his left hand, and he had been there long enough to hear the whole of it, and neither Hester nor Skeet had noticed him arrive. Because he had a way of arriving. He was 36 years old, and the whole parish knew him by 3 things. The first was the mark. It came up out of his collar on the right side of his throat, and spread over the jaw and the cheek to the temple in a broad pale marbled patch, smooth and flat and long since healed, the color of the inside of a shell, and in the winter it went a shade paler still. The second was the glove. He wore one on the right hand indoors and out, all the year round, and did not shake hands with anybody. And everybody in the parish had a theory about it, and the true one, which was that the last 3 fingers of that hand would not straighten, and had had no feeling in them since the January of 1795, was not one of the theories in circulation. The third was the voice. It had gone in the same week as the rest of him. At 3 feet, he was perfectly clear. At 10 feet, he was a man moving his mouth. He had learned never to try for volume, because trying made it worse and made him sound as though he were pleading, So he said everything once, quietly, and did not repeat it, and the parish had decided in about 1796 that this was contempt and had never troubled to revise the finding. "Mr. Skeet," said the Duke. "Your Grace, have I hired her properly?" "Your Grace has hired her properly," said Skeet, "and I will say so anywhere I am asked. I have no complaint of the hiring. I have a complaint of nothing at all today. I am only the clerk. You are the overseer." "I am both," said Skeet, "and I do them both properly, and your Grace will find that a great deal more inconvenient than if I did them badly." The Duke looked at him for a moment, and did not answer, and turned to Hester, and did not come any nearer, and said, in the ordinary voice of a man engaging a house servant, so that everybody within 20 feet heard it clearly, because he had angled his head to let them, "You will go to Sallow Reach in the morning. Mr. Nance keeps the walk. You will do whatever Mr. Nance tells you, and you will not do anything he does not tell you. Is that understood?" "Yes, Your Grace." "You will not order any work. You will not set any liquor. You will not touch the jack, the top, the sledge, or the winches. You will not tell any man in that walk how to do his work." Hester Crowle stood in the marketplace of the parish where she was born, and where her father had built the longest rope walk in 3 counties, and heard a man tell her she was not to speak in it, and said, "Yes, Your Grace," and did not move a muscle in her face, and 60 people watched her do it. "Say the last part again," said Skeet, mildly, to nobody. "I have said it once," said the Duke of Wrenhale, and put his hat on, and went. And that was the hiring. Hester walked back along the sallow lane in the dark, with her box on her shoulder and the shilling in her fist, and stopped where she always stopped, at the stile where you first get the whole length of it, and looked at the walk. There is no sight in England quite like a rope walk seen end on at dusk. It was 1,220 feet long. It ran along the flat ground above the sallow water on a bank her father had raised and drained and rolled for 2 years before he laid a single foot of floor, because a walk must be true and level, and hers was true to within 1.5 inches over the whole run. It was roofed the whole way, on 84 pairs of oak posts, the north side boarded, and the south side open in 27 bays with shutters that came down in weather. When the shutters were up and the sun was low, you could stand at the west end and see 1,220 feet of floor, with the light lying across it in 27 bars, and a man spinning at the far end was a black stroke the size of a nail paring, and if you shouted at him, he would not hear you, and there was a bell rope for that, and a code of taps that only 4 living people still knew. Inside, on the north wall, in white paint repainted every 3 years, ran the only motto Josiah Crowle ever put up anywhere: "A rope is made by walking backward." It is not a piece of philosophy. It is a plain description of the work. The spinner takes a bundle of hackled hemp round his waist, hooks a few fibres onto the whirling hook, and walks backward down the walk, paying the fibre out with his hands. And the yarn forms itself between his fingers and the hook, and he never once sees the work he is making from the front. He sees it coming toward him. He walks away from it for 300 feet with his back to where he is going, and his eyes on what he has already done. And if he walks too fast, the yarn is thin, and if he walks too slow, it is soft. And the only thing that tells him which is happening is the feeling in the fingers of his left hand. Hester had been able to do it since she was 9, and had run 300 feet backward down that floor in the dark, with her eyes shut, on a bet at 14, and come out level. She stood at the stile for a long time. There was no light in the counting house, and there was a light in the tarring house at the wrong hour, and the great doors at the east end were shut, which they should not have been in a dry November, because a walk that is shut sweats, and a walk that sweats rots its own floor. She counted the shutters that were down. There were 19 down and 8 up. Nobody had put them right since August. "1," said Hester Crowle out loud, to herself on the stile, in the dark. Day 1. She counted. That was the thing about her, and everybody who had ever worked with her knew it, and half of them found it unbearable. She counted turns, fathoms, hanks, posts, bays, shillings, minutes and days, out loud under her breath, without noticing she was doing it, and had done since she was small enough to be set on a barrel and given a tally stick to keep her quiet. A person who counts everything will sooner or later say the number in front of somebody who would rather it had not been said, and Hester Crowle had never in her life been able to let a wrong number stand. She could watch a man be cruel and hold her tongue. She could not watch him be 4 short. The next morning, at 10 minutes before 7, she came in at the west door of her father's rope walk, and was put on the Oakum bench by a man she had first met when he came to buy hemp off her at £3.8, shillings the hundredweight, and had cheated her by 1/4 of a stone in the weighing, and she had told him so at the time, in the yard, in front of his own carter, and he had never forgiven her for it. Mr. Bevel Nance was 41, and had been a hemp factor at the port at Bidcombe for 17 years, before the estate put him into Sallow Reach in the March, and he was one of those men who is very good at the part of a trade that happens on paper, and has no idea at all that the other part exists. He was not a fool. He could tell you the price of Riga hemp at the port on any Tuesday of the last 9 years, and what the freight was, and what a hundredweight would yield in yarn, and all of it was correct, and none of it had ever once been in the same room as a rope. Miss Crowle, Nance, you will understand, he said, that this is a very awkward arrangement for me. Yes, I have a walk to run and 31 hands in it, and a contract with the Board of Ordnance for 40 tons of cordage by the March, and now I am to have the late owner's daughter on my floor as a servant of the house at 50 shillings, which is less than I pay the tar hand, and she is to do what I say. Yes, do you resent it? It does not signify whether I resent it, said Hester. I have been given one thing to do this year, and it is not to lose the year. There is nothing else in it for me. You may set me to whatever you like, and I will do it, and I will not say anything. And if you are looking for a reason to be rid of me, you will have to make one up, because I am not going to give you one. He looked at her for a while. Then he took her down the walk to the east end, past the hackling boards, past the 3 spinning wheels, past 400 feet of floor with nothing at all happening on it, at 7 in the morning, in a walk that used to have 11 spinners on it before breakfast, and out into the tar house yard, and showed her a heap of old cable under a lean-to that came up past her shoulder. That, he said, is 4 tons of condemned rope out of the Bidcombe hulks and the edge. It is to be picked, all of it. You will unlay it into strands, and the strands into yarns, and pick the yarns into fibre, and put the fibre into that bin, and carry it to the loft, and tread it down. It is the meanest work in England, and it will take one person the best part of a year. Yes, Mr. Nance, have you anything to say to it? "The tar is hard on the hands after about the 3rd week," said Hester Crowle. "You want rag on the first 2 fingers and the thumb, and nothing on the rest. If you rag the whole hand, you cannot feel where the yarn parts, and you pick 3 times as slow." Nance stood there with his mouth slightly open. "That is the sort of thing," he said at last, "that I have been told you say. You asked me if I had anything to say to it. I did." "That was it," said Hester, and sat down on the bench, and took the first arm's length of old 5-inch cable across her knee, and began at 8 minutes past 7 on the 12th of November, 1800, on day 2 of 365, to take it to pieces. Picking oakum is not difficult. And that is the whole cruelty of it. You take a length of old tarred cable, and you untwist it against its lay, 3 strands out of the rope, then a dozen yarns out of each strand, and then you roll each yarn between your palms and your knee until the tar cracks and the fibers let go of one another, and come away in a gray-brown floss that smells of pine and salt and 20 years of somebody else's weather. There is no skill in it after the first hour. There is nothing to learn, nothing to improve, and no end, and the reason every parish in England used it as a punishment was not that it was hard, but that it was the exact opposite of making something. Hester Crowle sat on a plank in the tar house at Sallow Reach, and took her father's trade to pieces backward, 9 hours a day, and counted. The others in the walk did not know what to do with her. There were 31 hands on the books, and 22 of them had worked for her father, and every one of them had been told by Mr. Nance that Miss Crowle was a servant of the house, and was not to be applied to on any matter of the work, and every one of them, on about the 4th day, discovered that they could stand near the tar house door and say a thing out loud to no one in particular, and that a flat voice would say a number back. The 3rd wheel is running hot. It wants soap on the near gudgeon, and it wants it twice a day in frost, and it has not had it since August, and you will hear it go from a hum to a rattle about the middle of the afternoon. Nobody asked you, Hester. Nobody did, she agreed, and went on picking. Old Barnaby Yeo was 71 and had come into that walk in 1746 as a hackler, and had never done anything else. 55 years I have drawn hemp over them pins, he said, in the 3rd week to the wall, and I never once saw a Crowle sat down on the tar bench. And now I have, and I do not care for it, and I shall say so to any man that asks me. Say it out of the walk, Barnaby, said Hester, and not where Toby Witcher can hear you. Because there was Toby Witcher. He was 26, and he tarred yarn, and he was neither wicked nor clever, and every Saturday evening he walked the 2 miles into Nether Wrenhale and sat in the back room of the Anstey Arms with Mr. Ambrose Skeet and a mug he did not pay for, and told him what had happened at Sallow Reach that week, and Mr. Skeet wrote it in a small book with a soft pencil, and every man and woman in the walk knew it, including Toby, who was not ashamed of it, because Mr. Skeet had told him it was the parish's business, and it was. Hester never once told Toby Witcher anything that was not true, and never once told him anything that mattered. The Duke of Wrenhale came to the walk for the first time on day 17, which was the 27th of November at 8 in the morning, and came again on day 24 at 8 in the morning, and by about day 40 Hester Crowle had worked out something nobody in the parish had ever bothered to work out, which was that he was not choosing the hour. The south side of Sallow Reach walk faces the low winter sun down its whole 1,220 feet, and between 8 and 9:30 on a clear morning, every one of the 27 open bays throws a bar of sun across the floor, and the tar house doorway sits in the last of them and holds the heat like a brick. A man whose right side has not been able to get warm since 1795 will find that place if it exists within 4 miles of his house, and will find it without ever admitting to himself that he is looking for it, and will invent a reason to be there. His reason was the ordnance contract. He stood in the bay with his hat off and his right shoulder in the sun and asked Mr. Nance questions about tonnage. He never once, in the whole of the winter, came inside the tar house. He never once addressed her first. "Crowle, your grace." "Mr. Nance tells me the picking goes slowly." "It goes at £4 a day, your grace, which is £1 over the county rate, and there are 4 tons of it." "How long is that?" "It is 2,240 days, said Hester. "At £4. I shall not finish it." "No," said the Duke of Wrenhale. There was a silence, and out on the floor somebody dropped a top and swore at it and picked it up. "You are not to tell them how to do the work," he said. "I have not. Barnaby Yeo told my steward on Tuesday that the 3rd wheel was going to seize by Friday, and that you had said so in October. I did not say it to Barnaby Yeo. I said it to a wall, and Barnaby Yeo was on the other side of it, and I cannot help where walls are. Crowle, your grace, if you want me to sit in that room and let a wheel seize, I will sit in that room and let a wheel seize, and I will do it. And I will not complain of it, and I will not think it unjust, because I understand exactly why I am there, better than anybody in this parish, including you. But you will have to tell me to do it in those words, and then it will be your order and not my choice, and then I shall have obeyed and not merely kept quiet. And there is a difference, and it is the only property I have left." He stood in the doorway, with the sun on the side of his face. It was the first time she had been within 6 feet of him since the marketplace, and at 6 feet, in that light, she could see the whole of it plainly, the pale marbled ground of it running up out of the collar and across the jaw and the cheekbone to the temple, perfectly smooth, perfectly flat, with the fine sound skin at the edge of it a shade darker, like the tide line on a stone. And she looked at it, once, properly, for about as long as it takes to read a short word, and then she looked back down at the rope across her knee, and did not look at it again, and did not look carefully away from it either. He noticed. She did not know that he noticed, for another 7 months. "Let the wheel seize," he said. "Yes, your grace." "Crowle, say the number again." "It is day 24. "It is day 24, said the Duke of Wrenhale, and put his hat on and went, and Hester Crowle sat and listened to him walk away down 1,220 feet of oak floor, and counted his steps, because she counted everything, and there were 407 of them, and he stopped twice. On day 41, which was the 21st of December, and the shortest week of the year, Kezia Pring came into the tar house at noon, and put half a loaf and a piece of hard cheese down on the bench, and said, "There." Kezia was 19, and spun on the 2nd wheel, and had been taught by Hester herself in the summer of 1798, and had cried for 3 days when the walk was sold, and thought Hester was the finest thing that had ever happened to Nether Wrenhale, and had been working up to this gesture for a fortnight. "Kezia," said Hester, "do not start. Take it back. It is half a loaf." "Take it back," said Hester Crowle. "It is half a loaf, Hester. It is not a legacy, and I have got more than I want, and you have been on that bench since 7 without your dinner." "Kezia Pring," said Hester, and stopped, and put down the yarn, and made herself do the thing she was worst at in the world, which was to explain herself out loud to somebody who loved her. If you give me that bread, and Toby Witcher sees you, then on Saturday it goes into Mr. Skeet's little book that Hester Crowle was fed by Kezia Pring. And at the sessions, Mr. Skeet's man stands up and says the hiring was never a hiring at all, that I was maintained by charity in this parish like any other pauper, and that the whole year was a device got up to make me settled here. And they will believe him, because it would be true of anybody else. That is what half a loaf is. I am sorry. I am not able to make it be anything smaller. Kezia Pring stood there and went red and then white and picked up the bread. You could just have said no, she said. I know it. That was horrible. I know it, said Hester. I am not good at this. And Kezia Pring went out and did not speak to her for 11 days, and on the 12th day came back and stood in the doorway and said, Then I shall eat mine in here where you can see me. And that is not a gift, is it? And Hester Crowle put her head down over the tar and could not answer for a moment, and then said, No, that is not a gift. And that was how the two of them ate their dinner for the rest of the winter, 4 feet apart, one of them eating. The frost came in on the 2nd of January and stayed 5 weeks. On day 55, a boxed parcel arrived at the Sallow cottage with a blanket in it. Grey Whitney. New, worth about 14 shillings, and a card in a good hand that said only see Ansty. Hester carried it 4 miles to Wrenhale House the same evening and asked for Lady Charlotte, and was kept standing in the hall for 40 minutes, and then shown into a small room with a fire she did not go near. Lady Charlotte Ansty was 44, unmarried, ran her brother's house, and had run it since 1795, and was not a cruel woman and was not a warm one. You have brought it back, she said. I knew you would. I sent it anyway. If I sent it back by a carrier, there is no witness that it went back, only that it came. You have thought about this. I have thought about nothing else since the 11th of November, said Hester Crowle. Lady Charlotte looked at her for a while over the top of a pair of spectacles she did not need. Do you know what my brother has done to himself over you? She said. He cannot go near you. He cannot send you anything. He must be seen to put you at work that shames you, and every civil word he says to you within hearing of Toby Witcher is a shilling in Mr. Skeet's pocket at the sessions, and he has now to keep that up for 310 more days without one soul in this parish understanding why. And he bought that walk. He is the reason there is an order out against you at all, because if he had let it be broken up and sold in lots, you would have had £800 out of it, and a settlement of your own by renting a tenement, and you would never have been chargeable to anybody. He saved your father's walk, and he ruined you doing it. 311, said Hester Crowle. I beg your pardon. It is day 55, my lady. There are 310 days after this one, so there are 311. Lady Charlotte Ansty took the spectacles off. Good God, she said, you are as bad as he is. Mr. Ambrose Skeet came himself on day 68, the 17th of January, in the middle of the hardest frost since 1795, with a cart, 2 men, 300 weight of parish coal and a book, and stood in the lane outside the Sallow cottage with the book already open on his forearm, and called her name until she opened the door in a perfectly civil voice, with 4 neighbors watching from their own doorways, because he was not a sneak, and never had been. It is 11 degrees of frost, and you have no fuel in that house. The parish is offering you 300 weight of coal. No, I thank you. I am obliged to tell you that this is not a trick, and that if you take it you will be warm tonight. and that I will enter it in this book as relief given, because that is what it is, and I am not permitted to enter it as anything else. And once it is in the book, you are chargeable, and you will be in a cart to Fen Ditchling by Wednesday. I am telling you the price out loud on your own doorstep in front of witnesses, and I am still going to stand here for an hour, because I have seen what a person will agree to at 2 in the morning that they would not agree to at noon. Will you come in and sit down? Said Hester Crowle, since you are going to stand there anyway, and there is no fire in it, so nobody can say I gave you anything. So Ambrose Skeet sat for 50 minutes in an unheated room opposite a woman in a blanketless bed, both of them in their outdoor coats, and neither of them said very much. And at the end of it he stood up and said, "You have got 297 to go." 298, said Hester. 298, he said. I shall come again, and went out and told his men to take the coal to Widow Pring, who wanted it, and had no order out against her, and that was the only sensible thing that happened in the lane that day. 23 days later she got a cough that went down into her chest, and stayed there. She worked through it, because a servant who does not work is a servant who may be discharged, and by the 8th of February she was picking oakum with a rag over her mouth and could not get up the walk without stopping twice. And on the morning of the 9th of February, which was day 91, Kezia Pring looked at her for about 4 seconds and then put down her hemp and walked into Nether Wrenhale and fetched Mr. Doggett the surgeon. Hester was too far gone to argue, and Mr. Doggett came, and came again on the 12th, and did what he could, and it passed off, and by the 20th she was back on the bench. Kezia said nothing about how the surgeon had been paid, and Hester, who counted everything, did not ask, and that was the single failure of attention in Hester Crowle's entire year, and it cost her more than everything else put together. What got her back on the bench was not the milk, it was the walk, because Sallow Reach was going wrong, slowly, in the particular way a thing goes wrong when the man in charge of it is competent at the wrong half of it, and Hester Crowle sat at the east end of it for 9 hours a day and watched it happen and was not allowed to say one word, and it turned out that being unable to speak is a very good way of learning to see. What she saw between January and May was this. She saw the hemp change. Riga hemp comes in bales of about 300 weight, and you tell it by drawing a handful through your closed fist, and if this staple runs 4 feet and comes through clean and cool, it is what it says it is. In November the walk had been drawing hemp that ran 4 feet. In February it was running 30 inches, and in April a good deal of it was running 20, and it had a grey cast and a smell like a wet hedge. She saw the spinners change how they walked. Her father paid spinners by the day, and you could set a clock by the 3 wheels. Mr. Nance had put them on piece rate at 5 pence the hank, and by February there were 3 men on that floor, walking backward at 3 different speeds, and the yarn coming off the 3rd wheel was thin and hard and full of what the trade calls dry spots, which is fibre that has been pulled through faster than it wants, and has not taken its share of the twist. And in the 2nd week of May, she came up the ladder with a bin of picked oakum on her hip, and found the loft swept empty, and the boards swept in the direction of the spinning house door, and she stood at the top of that ladder for a long time, and then went down and picked oakum for the rest of the day, and said nothing to anybody. And that night, in her father's cottage, she got out the length book, Josiah Crowle had kept 3 books in his life, and the estate had taken 2 of them with the walk and left the 3rd, because nobody knew what it was. It was 400 pages of foolscap in 4 different hands, going back to 1761, and every page was 1 rope, the date it was laid, the hemp, the bale marks, the turns to the fathom, the yarns to the strand, the girth at 3 places, and then, at the bottom, in a column ruled in red, 2 numbers, being the length of that rope before it was proved, and the length of that rope 1 hour after the load came off. There were 2,900 ropes in that book. She had been made to copy pages of it as punishment when she was small, and she had had the reason for it put into her by repetition, from about the age of 6, in the same 11 words every time. Anything can hold. Only good rope comes back. That is the whole of the trade, and there is nothing else in it. A rope holds because it is fighting itself. The fibers are spun right into a yarn. The yarns are twisted left into a strand. The strands are laid right into a rope, and every part of it is pulling against the part above it. And a rope that is not fighting itself is not a rope, it is a bundle. When you put a load on it, it stretches, because every one of those turns opens a little. When you take the load off, it comes back, because the turn's close again, because the fiber is long enough and springy enough and gripping enough to drag them closed. That is what long hemp is for. Short fiber will hold a slow, steady pull as well as anything on earth, and will look perfect, and will feel perfect, and will coil down beautiful in the hand, and when the load comes off, it will not come back, because the fibers have slipped past one another inside the strand instead of stretching, and a rope that has slipped once will slip again, and the next time it will be under a snatch, and it will not be in a yard. It will be over a shaft. On the wall of the Sallow Reach counting house, there was a board of 14 standing orders in her father's paint, and the 9th of them read, "No winding rope goes out of this walk unmarked. Chalk at every 10 fathoms. Girth at 3 places. Enter both on the board before the proof and again 1 hour after." She had seen that board every day of her life and had stopped seeing it at about 15. It was still on the wall in May of 1801 because nobody had thought it worth the trouble of painting over. On day 156, which was the 15th of April, Mr. Futrell the attorney at last got an answer out of Fen Ditchling, and sent for her, and she walked the 4 miles in, and sat in a room that smelled of candle smoke and old paper, while a man of 60 in a brown wig told her, as kindly as he could manage, that the parish of Nether Wrenhale was in the right. "There is no fault in the order," said Mr. Futrell. "I had hoped there would be. There is not. Your father Josiah Crowle was born at Fen Ditchling in 1737 and came into this parish in the spring of 1758 at 21, and he came on a certificate, and I have the copy of it here, signed by the churchwardens and overseers of Fen Ditchling, and allowed by 2 justices, acknowledging him to be their parishioner, and undertaking to receive him again whenever he should become chargeable." Do you know what that meant? It meant they would have him back. It meant they owned him, said Futrell. A certificate man may live where he pleases and cannot be removed until he actually falls chargeable, and in exchange he can never, by any means, gain a settlement in the parish he lives in. Not by service. Not by apprenticeship. Not by 40 years of paying rates on the finest rope walk in 3 counties, which your father did. He built that walk, he employed 1/5 of this parish, he served on the highways, he gave the church its west gallery, and he was a Fen Ditchling man on the day he died in March of last year, and so are you, because you were born to him in 1771, and you have never gained a settlement of your own. and a child takes the father's until she gets one. Hester Crowle sat still for a while. He knew, she said. I should think he knew perfectly well. Most of them do. It does not matter while there is money. It only matters at the end. Mr. Futrell, is there a door in this at all? There is one, said the attorney, and it is the reason his grace did what he did at Martinmas, and you are going to have to hold it in your head for another 200 days. The disability is your father's, not yours. He came in under a certificate, and the law shut that gate behind him for life. You were born here, and you have never been certificated in your own person, and you may gain a settlement here in the ordinary way that any servant in England may gain one, which is by a hiring for a year and service under it for the whole of that year, unbroken, in this parish, to a master of this parish, with no other wage, no other master, no relief taken, and no part of the year served anywhere else. 365 days, that is the door. It is the only door in the wall, and it is 365 days long, and there is not a second one. She broke it on day 182. It was the 11th of May, and a 90-fathom hawser had come back from a lighter contractor at Bidcombe with a letter, because it measured 87. And Mr. Nance stood in the middle of the floor and told 6 people that the tackleboard man had lost 3 fathoms in the laying, and would make it good out of his wages, and the tackleboard man was a 20-year man named Peter Trigg, who had never lost a fathom in his life. And Hester Crowle, who could sit on a bench for 6 months and be called a pauper and not blink, could not do it. It was not lost in the laying, she said. Everybody turned round. You were not asked, Miss Crowle. You laid 92 fathoms of yarn to make 90 of rope, said Hester, and it wanted 96. A 4-inch hawser takes back 1.12 feet in the laying, and a hard-laid one takes back more, and this walk has taken back 1 in 12 since 1761, and it is written on the tackleboard in white paint 3 feet from where you are standing. Peter Trigg laid you the rope you told him to lay. You measured the yarn. There was a silence of a kind that Sallow Reach had not had in it for a year. Go back to the tar house, said Mr. Nance. Yes, Mr. Nance, said Hester Crowle, and went. The Duke of Wrenhale came the next morning, day 183, the 12th of May, at 9 o'clock, and he did not come to the sunny bay. He came the whole length of the walk to the tar house door with Mr. Nance behind him, and Mr. Ruddock, the steward, behind Mr. Nance. And he stopped 8 feet away where Toby Witcher at the tar kettle, and Barnaby Yeo at the hackling board, and Kezia Pring at the second wheel, could all hear him perfectly. And he took his hat off and held it in his left hand, and he said it once, quietly, in the voice that made the parish call him proud. Stand up. She stood up. There is a book, said the Duke of Wrenhale, in the back room of the Anstey Arms. It has your name in it. Every Saturday evening a man writes in it what I have said to you, and what you have said to me, and how long I stood here, and whether I took my hat off. In November there were 4 entries. There are now 61. In October that book will be carried into the Sessions House and read out, and the question before the bench will not be whether I hired you, because I did, in front of 60 people. The question will be what kind of hiring it was. If that book shows a master and a servant, you will have your settlement, and the order will fall. If it shows anything else at all, an accommodation, an arrangement, a compact between a man who ruined a woman and the woman he ruined, then it was never a hiring, and a hiring that is not a hiring is nothing, and 364 days of nothing is nothing, and you will go to Fen Ditchling in a cart, and there is no second year to try again in, because I shall not be permitted to hire you twice. Nobody in that walk moved. "So you will not say numbers to Mr. Nance," he said. "You will not say numbers to me. You will not say numbers to a wall with Barnaby Yeo standing behind it. You are the lowest servant on this ground, and you will be spoken to as the lowest servant on this ground is spoken to, and I will do the speaking, and I will do it where it can be heard, and you will answer yes, your grace, and nothing else, from now until the 11th of November. Yes, your grace. Peter Trigg's wages are not to be touched," said the Duke to Mr. Nance without turning round. "Yes, your grace," said Nance. And then the Duke of Wrenhale did the only thing he did in the whole of that year that Mr. Skeet's book could not hold, which was to take 2 steps forward, which put him at 3 feet, and put his head down a little, and say 9 words in a voice that a man at 8 feet could see, but could not hear. Toby Witcher, at the tar kettle, 20 feet away, saw a duke put his face down close to a servant, and saw the servant go white to the lips, and wrote in the book that Saturday that his grace had reprimanded Hester Crowle very sharp on the floor of the walk, so sharp that she could not answer, and Mr. Skeet underlined it, and it was the best entry he had, and he read it out in October, and it did him no good at all. What the Duke of Wrenhale actually said, at 3 feet, in 9 words, was, "It is day 183. I have not missed one either." And then he put his hat on and walked 1,220 feet back down his own rope walk, and Hester Crowle sat down on the Oakum bench with her hands shaking, and picked 4 pounds of fibre that day like every other day, and did not get a single one of the yarns wrong, and at some point in the afternoon put her forehead down on the coil for a moment, and then picked it up again. On day 190, which was a Sunday, the 19th of May, she went to the churchyard, which she did on Sundays because she did not go into the church, and stood at her father's stone, and Ambrose Skeet came out of the porch after service, and crossed the grass to her and stood on the other side of it. "Miss Crowle, Mr. Skeet, Miss Futrell, will have told you about the certificate." "He has. He will not have told you the other half, because he does not know it," said Skeet, "and I have been 6 months deciding whether to tell you, and I find I want to. Do you know how your father hired his hands? By the year. By 51 weeks, said Ambrose Skeet. Every one of them from 1763 until he failed. 51 weeks, and then a week out, and then hire them again, so that not one of them ever served a whole year in this parish, and not one of them ever got a settlement here, and every man in that walk stayed the property of wherever he came from until the day he could not work, and then the parish that owned him took him back. It is not a secret, and it is not even a wickedness by itself. Half the masters in England did it, and this vestry ordered it. There is a minute in the book, the 4th of April, 1763, that no person be hired in this parish for a full year without the leave of the vestry, and Josiah Crowley proposed it, and it was carried, and he was thanked from the chair. The rooks went over the church tower. Hester Crowley stood with her hand flat on the top of her father's stone. My father was Abel Skeet, said Ambrose Skeet. He hackled hemp in your father's walk for 19 years. He was hired 20 times and never once for 52 weeks. In the March of 1788, his hands went and he could not draw a strick over the pins any more, and he applied to this parish, and this parish, which I did not then serve, sent him in a cart to Barrow Hollowell, which he had left at 22, and where he knew one living person. And he was 63 years old, and he did not last 3 winters. I was 41 when they put him in the cart. Your father stood in the lane and shook his hand, and gave him 2 guineas, and was sorry, and I believe he was sorry, and I have never once thought otherwise. And then he went in and hired the next man for 51 weeks. How many? Said Hester. I beg your pardon. How many families? 11, that I can put a name to, said Skeet, and 4 more I am fairly sure of. It is all in the chest. Every hiring in this parish for 60 years is in the chest, in the master's own hand, because the vestry required it, and I am the clerk, and I will unlock it for you on Tuesday if you ask me, and I will not charge you for it, and that is not relief. It is the parish book, and you may see it as a parishioner. I am not a parishioner. You are today, said Ambrose Skeet, for 175 more days, and put his hat on and went. She went on the Tuesday. It was day 192, and Mr. Skeet unlocked the chest in the vestry and set a candle down, and went and stood at the window with his back to her, and Hester Crowle read her father's handwriting for 3 hours. It was worse than she had let herself imagine on the walk in. It was not 11 families, and it was not 15. Between 1763 and 1799, Josiah Crowle entered 347 hirings into that book, and 341 of them were for 51 weeks, and the other 6 were for 51 weeks and 3 days. He had written the number 51 in his own hand 341 times, in a good round upright hand that she had been taught to copy, and in 1781, on a page where the ink had run, he had written it, crossed it out because he had put 52 by habit, and written it again. There was no concealment anywhere in the book, and no shame in it either. It was simply the way the thing was done, entered by a careful man who entered everything, for 36 years, and thanked for it from the chair. Mr. Skeet, said Hester Crowle, at the end of the 3 hours. He turned round from the window. You know what I am going to do to you at the sessions, he said. I know it. It is the same thing. It is the same thing, she said. It is exactly the same thing. It is the thing my father invented in this parish, and it is being done to me in my father's parish out of my father's book, by the son of a man my father did it to. And if I get through it, I shall have got through it on a door that he could not have got through himself. Yes, Mr. Skeet, does it help you? Ambrose Skeet stood by the window for a while, with the light behind him. No, he said, I thought it would. I have thought about it for 13 years, and I find it does not. And I am going to do it anyway, because I am the overseer, and because if I let you through on account of my feelings, then the next woman who comes before me gets the cart, and the difference between her and you will have been that I liked you. And my father was put in a cart by men who did things on account of their feelings. That is the most honest thing anybody has said to me since November. It is not meant kindly. I did not take it kindly, said Hester Crowle, and closed her father's book, and went back to Sallow Reach, and was on the Oakum bench at 7 the next morning, on day 193 of 365, with 172 to go. The summer of 1801 was the summer the Baltic shut. Mr. Bevel Nance had taken the ordnance contract in the September of 1800, 40 tons of cordage delivered by the March, at £34 the ton, and at the time that was a fair price, and he was clever to get it. Then the northern powers closed the trade, and Riga Rhine hemp that had stood at £38 the ton in the autumn was at 58 by April, and a man who has contracted to deliver 40 tons of finished cordage at 34 cannot do it out of hemp at 58, and cannot get out of it, and cannot tell the board he cannot do it, and has 31 hands and a walk and a reputation and a house at Bidcombe with a brass knocker on it. Hester Crowle understood all of that by the middle of June without anybody telling her a word of it, because she could read the state of a man's mind off the state of his hemp loft the way a farmer reads weather off a hill. What she did not understand until the 9th of September was what he had decided to do about it. In the meantime, she picked Oakum, and the year went past the way years do when every day of one is the same, slowly in the day and very fast in the month. She got to know things about the Duke of Wrenhale that nobody in the parish knew, because nobody in the parish had ever spent 200 mornings 8 feet from him. She learned that he could not judge heat on the right side at all, so that he would take a cup and hold it against the mark on his jaw before he drank, testing it against the only piece of him that could take harm without telling him, and that it looked from the far end of a room like a man being fastidious. She learned that he stopped a stride short of a step down and then took it every time, and that the parish called this pride, and that it was in fact 3 fingers that would not grip a rail. She learned that he had not been inside the parish church since 1795, because Saint. Ninian's at Nether Wrenhale has a stone floor and a north aisle and no stove, and a man whose right side has never been warm since the January of 1795 will not sit in it for 90 minutes, and that in 6 years he had never said so to a living soul, and the parish had settled on the explanation that he despised them, and he had let it stand, because the true reason sounded to him like a man asking to be pitied, and he would rather be hated. She learned all of this by watching, at 8 feet, for 9 hours a day, with a rope across her knee, and she never asked him a single question about any of it, because she was not allowed to, and because she would not have asked anyway. And he learned things too, and she did not find that out until much later. He learned that she had looked at the mark on day 24, once, properly, and then had stopped, and had never afterwards done either of the 2 things everybody else did, which are to look and pretend not to, and to arrange the whole conversation so as to keep it out of the field of view. He learned that when he spoke, she came a step nearer instead of asking him to speak up, and that she had begun doing it in the first fortnight, and that in 6 years she was the 2nd person to do it, and the first had been paid to. Kezia Pring got the 3rd wheel in July, which was a promotion Miss Nance made because he had lost 2 spinners to the Bidcombe yard, and not because he thought a woman of 19 could spin. She was bad for a fortnight, in the way that everybody is bad, walking too fast, so that the yarn came off thin and hard and full of dry spots. And she knew it and could not find the fault, and on the 3rd Tuesday she came into the tar house at noon, with her hands over her face. Hester Crowle did not tell her. She could not tell her. What she did instead was to sit on the Oakum bench with the door open and pick, and count, out loud, under her breath, the way she had counted since she was 4 years old and could not stop, and what she counted that afternoon for about 40 minutes was the pace of a walker. 1, and 2, and 3, and turn. 1, and 2, and 3, and turn. That is 11 seconds to the pair of posts, and it wants 14. 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and turn. 14, there is 14. And Kezia Pring stood in the doorway with her hands still over her face and listened to a woman counting to herself in an empty room, and went out, and went back to the 3rd wheel, and walked backward down 300 feet of oak floor at 14 seconds to the pair of posts. And the yarn came off her fingers round and soft and full and even. And she laid her first good 100 fathoms on the 9th of August, and cried in the hemp loft for a quarter of an hour. Nobody had said anything to anybody. Nobody could have written anything in a book. On day 244, which was the 12th of July, Mr. Bevel Nance came into the tar house at 6 in the evening when the walk was empty, and shut the door behind him, which was the first time in 8 months that door had been shut with 2 people inside it, and put 2 guineas down on the bench beside her hand. "That is a quarter's wages for you," he said, "and it is my own money and not the estate's. And there is another 2 at Michaelmas, and another 2 at Christmas, and a place at a walk at Ipswich where nobody has ever heard of Nether Wrenhale. Take it off the bench, Mr. Nance. You do not even know what I am asking you for. I know you are asking me for something worth 6 guineas and a place at Ipswich," she said, "which is a great deal more than you would pay for a quiet servant. And I know that if one of those coins touches my hand this year, I go to Fen Ditchling in a cart. And you have come at 6 in the evening with the door shut, so that there is no witness that you offered, and no witness that I refused. I have not looked at those coins." Nance picked them up. He stood there for a while, with the money in his fist. He was 41 and he was sweating, and he was not, at that moment, a wicked man. He was a frightened one, which is a thing Hester Crowle had cause to think about a great deal afterwards, because the frightened ones do more harm. "You have not seen anything," he said. It was not a question. "I have not seen anything." "Missy, Nance, then why did I come?" "I do not know," said Hester. "You will, though," he said, and opened the door, and went. She began weighing on the 15th. She had entered every pound of picked Oakum on the loft slate since the 12th of November, because Mr. Nance had told her to, and the total from Martinmas to Midsummer was 19 hundredweight, 1 quarter and 7 pounds. Picked oakum has exactly one honest use, which is caulking, and the Bidcombe caulker's cart had come 5 times and taken 3 hundredweight in all, and the estate's own use for the wharf and the lock gates would not run to 1 hundredweight in a year. So 15 hundredweight and a quarter of picked fibre had gone out of that loft into the walk, and there is only one door out of that loft that does not go into the yard, and it goes down 4 steps into the spinning house. On the 9th of September, which was day 303, she carried a bin up the ladder at 20 minutes past 6 in the morning, an hour before the walk filled, and stood in the loft door, and looked down the 4 steps at the spinning house floor, and there was a heap of hackled fibre made up ready for the first wheel, 3 stricks of it, and she went down and drew a handful of the top strick through her closed fist, which took about 2 seconds, and that was the end of not knowing. Good Riga hemp, drawn through the fist, runs long and cool, and comes out of your hand the colour of new straw, with a shine on it, like the inside of a barley husk. What came through her fist was 20 inches long, and warm and dusty and grey-brown right through, and smelled of pine tar, and left her palm sticky. And 4 threads of it were still crimped into the exact spiral of a yarn that had been laid up in a rope and gone round a sheave 10,000 times. It was hers. She had picked it. She could have told you which cable it came off. She went back to the tar house, and sat down and picked oakum until 5 in the evening, and did not speak to anybody, and on the way home along the Sallow Lane she stopped at the stile where you get the whole length of the walk, and stood there in the last of the light, and worked out what she was permitted to do, which took a very short time, because the answer was nothing. She could not tell Mr. Nance, because Mr. Nance had put it there. She could not tell Mr. Ruddock, because a servant who accuses her master's manager of a fraud is either right, in which case the manager is turned off, or wrong, in which case she is turned off for insolence. And a servant turned off in October has not served her year, and Mr. Ruddock would have to lay it before the Duke, who would then have to act on the word of the one person in the county whose word costs him everything if it is believed, and everything if it is not. She could not write to the Board of Ordnance, because a servant does not correspond with the board about her master's business, and Mr. Skeet's man would read that letter out at the sessions and say, quite correctly, that no servant in England behaved so, and that this was never a servant at all. She could tell nobody. She had 62 days left. And on the 19th of September, Mr. Standish Loach, agent of the Duke's lead mines at Wrenhale Edge, wrote to Mr. Nance to say that the winding rope on the bell shaft was 6 years old and going, and that he wanted a new one, 120 fathoms of 6-inch cable laid, on the drum before the end of October, because 40 men went down that shaft in a kibble every morning at 6, and came up at 4, and he was not going to be the man who put an old rope through another winter. He added a postscript in his own hand. It said, I have bought rope of Sallow Reach since I was a lad, and Mr. Josiah Crowley sent me 2 numbers with every winding rope he ever laid for this mine, being the length before the proof and the length 1 hour after, and I have not had 2 numbers since 1799, and I should be obliged if I might have them again, and I shall want the proof done at the edge where I can see it, and I shall ask Mr. Fitchett and the ratepayers to come and see it too, since it is their men. Mr. Nance read the postscript out loud in the counting-house on the 21st of September with his hand quite steady, and said that of course Mr. Loach should have his 2 numbers, and that the walk would be glad of a proof at the edge before the ratepayers, because there had been talk in the parish that hemp had gone out of Sallow Reach that ought not to have gone out of it, and a rope holding 3 tons and 400 weight in front of 40 men was the shortest way to finish talk. He meant every word of it, and that was the thing that frightened her most in the whole of the year. Mr. Bevel Nance was not bluffing. He had made 120 fathoms of 6-inch cable out of the best of what he had, and a great deal of what he had picked, and he had laid it hard, and he had tarred it well, and he had coiled it down on the drum himself, and he knew, the way a man knows a sum he has done 3 times, that it would take 3 tons and 400 weight and stand there all day and not part. He was right. It would. On day 328, which was the 4th of October, the first white frost of the autumn came down on the Sallow Flat, and the Duke of Wrenhale came into the walk at 20 minutes past 7, with his hat in his left hand and his right hand not in the glove, because on a hard morning the 3 fingers would not go into it, and a man cannot put a glove on a hand he cannot feel, with the other hand full of hat. He stood in the bay in the sun with his back to the floor, and worked at it for a while and could not do it, and Hester Crowle came out of the tar-house with 3 stricks of hackled hemp over her arm on her way to the loft, which was a journey she had made 400 times and did not need to make at that hour, and stopped, and put 1 strick of hemp down on the trestle between them, and said nothing at all, and went on to the loft. Hemp out of the hackle, before it goes anywhere near tar, is the warmest thing in a rope walk. It comes off the pins loose and full of air, and it holds the heat of a room in it the way a haystack does. and every hackler in England knows it, and every hackler in England puts his hands into it in the winter, and nobody has ever written it down. When she came back down the ladder, the strick was where she had left it, and the glove was on, and the Duke of Wrenhale was looking at the floor. "Crowle, your grace." "How did you know that?" "My grandfather had the same thing in the same hand from a different cause," said Hester. "And my father used to leave a strick on the trestle for him every cold morning for 11 years, and never once said a word about it. And my grandfather never once thanked him. And I asked my father why when I was 8, and he said, because then it would be a kindness, and he would have to refuse it. And what is it if nobody says anything?" "It is hemp on a trestle," said Hester Crowle. "It is day 328, said the Duke of Wrenhale. 37 to go, she said. "Yes, your grace, may I say one thing that is not a number?" "No," he said. "Not for 37 days. "No," she agreed, and picked up the other 2 stricks and went back down the walk, and he stood in the sun in the bay for a while longer than he needed to, and then went and asked Mr. Nance a question about tonnage. The proof was set for the 7th of October at the bell shaft at Wrenhale Edge, and it was the nearest thing to a public holiday that parish had had in years. There were 40 men off the morning corps, and Mr. Standish Loach, and Mr. Fitchett the other overseer, and Ambrose Skeet with his book, and Mr. Ruddock, and 20 or 30 ratepayers, and Lady Charlotte Anstey in the estate carriage on the road above, and the Duke of Wrenhale standing at the crown of the shaft with his hat off, and Mr. Beverl Nance with his coat brushed, and a good colour in his face, and at the back carrying a bag of chalk, a 20-foot line, a strip of parchment for the girths and a slate, because somebody has to carry them, and it is the lowest job on the ground, Hester Crowle, servant of no parish. She had been sent by Mr. Nance himself, who had looked round the walk on the Monday for the person of least consequence in it, and found her. "You will mark, and you will measure, and you will write down what you are told to write down," he said, "and you will not speak." Yes, Mr. Nance, they proved 2 ropes that morning, and the second was not Mr. Loach's idea, and not the Duke's. It was Mr. Loach's storekeeper, an old man called Nathaniel Pye, who said in front of everybody that there was 100 fathoms of 6-inch in the store that had come off the bell shaft in 1795 after 6 years on the drum, laid at Sallow Reach in 1789, and that if they were going to hang weight on 1 rope, they might as well hang it on 2 and see the difference. And Mr. Loach said it was a fair thought, and sent 4 men for it. Mr. Nance said nothing against it, because there was nothing he could say against it that would not sound like a man who had something to lose, and because he was still perfectly certain, and because he was in a way right, his rope did not part, and the old rope did not part, and neither of them came anywhere near parting. What Hester Crowle did from 11 in the morning until 20 minutes past 2 in the afternoon was exactly what she was told to do, and nothing else. She chalked the new rope at every 10 fathoms from the eye, which made 12 marks. She took the girth at 3 places with the parchment strip, and marked the strip with a pin. She wrote the length between the 1st and 12th marks on the slate, 110 fathoms, and the 3 girths, and did the same on the 1789 rope. She held the bag while 2 men shackled the eye to the crown timber. She stood back while the kibble was filled with pig iron and lead ore to 3 tons and 400 weight by Mr. Loach's own beam, and hung on the rope for 1 hour by Mr. Loach's own watch, and she did not look at it, because there was nothing to see, and 40 men looked at it for an hour anyway. She stood back while the load came off. She waited 1 hour more, because Order 9 of the Standing Orders of Sallow Reach Rope Walk says 1 hour after, and Mr. Loach had asked for the numbers his father used to get, and those are the numbers his father used to get. And then, at 20 minutes past 2, she measured both ropes again with the same 20-foot line and the same parchment strip in front of the same 40 men, and wrote 4 numbers on the slate in chalk, and set the slate against the crown timber where the walk's numbers had always been set, and went and stood at the back with the empty bag. Nobody looked at the slate. It is the most extraordinary thing about that whole afternoon, and everyone who was there afterwards agreed on it. There were upwards of 60 people on that dressing floor, and 4 numbers in chalk 3 feet high, and for the better part of 2 minutes not one person read them. Because the rope had held, and holding was what they had come for, and Mr. Loach was already saying something civil to Mr. Nance about getting it onto the drum by Friday. The Duke of Wrenhale walked over and read the slate. Then he stood beside it for a moment with his hat in his left hand. Then he said once, quietly, in the only voice he had, "Mr. Loach, will you read this out?" And nobody heard him. He was 12 feet from the nearest man, and the nearest man was talking, and Hester Crowle, at the back, with the empty chalk bag in her hands, did not move and did not speak, because she was a servant and had been told not to, and had 34 days left, and the whole of the last year came down to about 4 seconds, in which she found out what she was. It was Ambrose Skeet who moved. He had been watching the Duke of Wrenhale for 6 years with a clerk's attention and no affection whatever, and he was the only man on that ground who had ever bothered to learn what the man's face did when he had said something and it had not landed, and he put 2 fingers in his mouth and whistled. And 60 people stopped talking at once and turned round, and Ambrose Skeet said, in a voice that carried to the road, "His Grace is speaking." And then they came in. That was the thing Hester Crowle never afterwards got out of her head, and she saw it from the back with a chalk bag in her hands. 60 men in a half-circle on a mine floor, taking 3 steps and 4 steps and 6 steps forward, quite naturally, the way people do when they have been told there is something to hear, closing in around a man who had not raised his voice in 6 years, until they were near enough. "Thank you," said the Duke of Wrenhale. "These are the numbers Mr. Loach asked for." The new rope measured 110 fathoms between the first mark and the 12th, and it now measures 110 fathoms and 11 feet 4 inches. And it has not come back. And the girth at the loaded part was 6 inches, and it is now 5 inches and 5/8. The rope Mr. Pye fetched out of the store was laid in this parish in 1789, and worked 6 years on this shaft. It measured 100 fathoms between the first mark and the 11th before the load, and it measures 100 fathoms and 5 inches now, and it has come back, and the girth has not moved by anything this line will show. Both ropes held. Only one of them came back. He let that sit for a moment. "Mr. Nance," he said, "what is in the new rope?" What was in the new rope was 1,500 weight and a quarter of picked oakum out of the Sallow Reach loft, spun back into yarn on the 3rd wheel between the May and the September, and made up to weight and girth with the short grey Petersburg stuff that was all a man could buy at that price in that summer, and 9 tons of Riga hemp had gone out of the yard in June to a factor at Bidcombe at £58 the ton, and the money had gone against the ordnance contract, and every figure of it was in Mr. Nance's own hand, correct to a penny, because he was very good indeed at the part of the trade that happens on paper. He said all of it standing on the dressing floor at Wrenhale Edge in front of 60 people in about 4 minutes, and he did not lie once, and at the end of it he said, it would have held, and Mr. Standish Loach said, it would have held until it did not, and that was the last thing anybody said to Bevel Nance in that parish. The rope was condemned and cut up. The ordnance contract was surrendered, and the Duke of Wrenhale paid the difference, which was £1,100 and some shillings. A new 120 fathoms of 6-inch was laid at Sallow Reach in 19 working days out of hemp, bought at £61 the ton. Kezia Pring spun a fifth of the yarn in it, and it went on to the drum of the bell shaft on the 2nd of November, and Hester Crowle was not permitted to touch any part of it, and picked 4 pounds of Oakum a day for the whole 19. And on the 12th of October, which was day 336, Mr. Ambrose Skeet walked out to Sallow Reach with the overseer's book under his arm, and asked for her at the tar house door, and opened it flat on the trestle at the page for February. 9th February, 1801, he read. Paid Mr. Doggett, surgeon, for attending Hester Crowle at the Sallow cottage, being sick and without means, 4 shillings and 6 pence. Entered by me. Witnessed by Mr. Fitchett. Hester Crowle looked at the entry for a long time. Kezia, she said, Miss Pring came to me on the 9th of February, and told me you would not last the week, and I told her exactly what the parish could do, and exactly what it would cost you, and she asked me whether you would rather be settled or alive, and I said that was not a question the overseer could answer, and she said it was not a question she needed help with either, and she signed the application herself. She has carried it since February and said nothing to you, because she was afraid of what you would do about it, and she was right to be. And you have had it since February. I have had it since February, said Ambrose Skeet. I have not been in a hurry. There was no sense spending it while there was every chance you would break the year yourself, and you did not. And now there are 29 days left, and I am spending it. You are a person relieved by this parish within the year of your hiring. You were chargeable on the 9th of February. The service is broken, and the year is nothing, and I shall say so at the sessions, and I shall be believed, because it is written in my own book, in my own hand, and I am the overseer, and I have never yet been wrong about a settlement. Mr. Skeet, Miss Crowle, is there an answer to it? There is one, said Skeet, and I am not going to pretend there is not. The vestry may order the entry struck out. If the money was never applied for by you, and never received by you, and is repaid in full, the vestry may resolve that it was not relief to you at all, but a payment made to a surgeon on another person's application, and order it struck, and if it is not in the book, I have nothing to stand up with. It wants a vestry, and a motion, and a majority of the ratepayers present, and somebody to stand up in that room and ask for it. Who may ask for it? Anybody who has a right to speak in the vestry, said Ambrose Skeet, which is every ratepayer of this parish and not one other living soul, and if His Grace the Duke of Wrenhale gets up in that room and asks for it on your behalf, Miss Crowle, then I shall stand up after him and say the word accommodation, and I shall say it 3 times, and every man in that room will go home and think about it. You may ask for it. Nobody else can do you any good at all. She had 4 shillings and 6 pence to find, and no lawful way on earth to earn a farthing of it. And she found it on day 351, the 27th of October, by walking the 9 miles into Bidcombe, and back, and selling to Mr. Purslow the silversmith a thin gold ring on a black cord that had been her mother's and had been round her own neck since she was 17, and which had come through the sale of the walk because it had never been in it. He gave her 9 shillings. She paid 4 shillings and 6 pence to Mr. Fitchett at the vestry room the same evening, and took a receipt, and put the rest into a tin on the shelf and did not touch it, because it was not wages and not a gift and not relief. It was the price of her own property, and Mr. Futrell had spent 40 minutes making quite sure of that before he let her do it. The vestry met in the south aisle of St. Ninian's on the evening of the 3rd of November, 1801, which was day 358, and 44 ratepayers came, which was 3 times the ordinary number, and it was extremely cold. The Duke of Wrenhale sat at the back and did not speak once in 2 hours, and did not take his hat off in that building, and nobody understood why. Hester Crowle stood up at 20 minutes to 9 in a grey stuff gown with tar under her fingernails, and asked for one thing, and in order to ask for it, she stood in her father's parish church and said her father's name and the number 51 out loud 341 times over in one sentence. My father was Josiah Crowle, she said. He built the walk at Sallow Reach, and he paid 1/5 of the rates in this parish for 30 years, and he hired 347 people in it, and 341 of them he hired for 51 weeks, and 6 for 51 weeks and 3 days, so that not one of them should ever be settled here, and he did it because this vestry asked him to in April of 1763 and thanked him from the chair, and it is all in the chest in his own hand. Abel Skeet hackled hemp for him for 19 years and went to Barrow Hollowell in a cart at 63. I have read the names. There are 15 of them I can put a face to, and I have been in 9 of those houses. I am not going to stand here and tell you that what is being done to me is unjust, because it is the same thing, and it is my family's own invention, and if I am removed on Thursday there is nobody in England who can say the parish did anything to me that it was not taught to do by my father. I am asking for something else. On the 9th of February I was too ill to know what was done for me, and I never asked this parish for a farthing, and I never had a farthing of it in my hand, and it has been repaid in full, and Mr. Fitchett holds the receipt. I am asking the vestry to strike the entry. That is all I am asking for, and it is the first thing I have asked anybody for since the 11th of November last year. She sat down. Nobody said anything for a while. Mr. Fitchett moved that the entry be struck out. The motion was seconded by Nathaniel Pye, storekeeper at the Edge, who was not a ratepayer at all and had to be seconded over again by a farmer named Oakum. 9 hands went up for it and 8 against, and 26 men sat with their arms folded and voted neither way. And Ambrose Skeet, overseer of the poor and clerk of the vestry, wrote the numbers down and did not vote, and then put his pencil down and stood up and said the only thing he ever said in that room about his own affairs. I have been 13 years waiting to put a Crowle in a cart, he said, and I find, having got her into one, that I do not want her in it. And I want the vestry to understand that this is not mercy, and I am not softened. She has said in this church what nobody in this parish has said out loud in 40 years. And the entry is struck, and the year stands, and on the 11th of November she will be settled here. And every man in this room will then be able to do the next thing, which is the thing I actually came for. I move that the minute of the 4th of April, 1763, be rescinded, and that no hiring in this parish be made for 51 weeks again, while I am the clerk of it. And that was carried without a division. She served the last 7 days. Nobody was allowed to give her anything, and everybody knew it. So what the parish of Nether Wrenhale did instead, on every one of the last 7 evenings, was to walk out along the Sallow Lane in 1s and 2s and stand at the stile where you get the whole length of the walk, and not go in, and not call out, and go home again. She counted them, because she counted everything. It was 61 people over 7 evenings, and 9 of them came more than once, and Ambrose Skeet came on the 8th and stood there for 20 minutes, and did not wave. Day 365 was the 10th of November, and it was a Tuesday, and she picked 4 pounds of Oakum. On the morning of Martinmas, the 11th of November 1801, at 20 minutes past 11, in the market-place at Nether Wrenhale, in front of Mr. Futrell, Mr. Ruddock, Mr. Skeet, Mr. Fitchett, 2 justices and about 200 people, Mr. Charles Ruddock counted 50 shillings into the hand of Hester Crowle, servant of the parish of Nether Wrenhale, and Mr. Skeet wrote it in the book and said, "The year is served," and closed it. The appeal was called on at the January sessions, and Mr. Skeet offered no evidence, and the order of removal was quashed with costs against the parish. And Mr. Skeet paid the costs out of the rate and entered them in full. Kezia Pring gave her the ring back on the 12th, which was the first day it was lawful to give her anything, and the walk had clubbed the 9 shillings between 22 of them in 3 days, and Barnaby Yeo had put in 2 shillings of it, which was a Saturday's beer for a month, and Mr. Purslow at Bidcombe had knocked a shilling off the price when he heard what it was for, and had not been thanked for it either, in the proper way. The Duke of Wrenhale hired 31 hands at Sallow Reach that Martinmas for 52 weeks, every one of them, and hired a master ropemaker for the walk at £90 a year, and there was exactly 1 candidate. She came into the walk at 10 minutes before 7 on the 12th of November 1801, and stood at the west end and looked down 1,220 feet of oak floor, with the light coming in through 27 open bays in 27 bars. And there was a man standing in the last bay by the tar-house door, with his hat in his left hand and his right hand not in the glove, because there was frost on the flat. So she walked the length of it. It took 407 steps, and she counted them, and she did not stop twice, and about halfway down she remembered that she had spent an entire year learning to walk toward a man who could not be heard, and that the whole of her father's trade is made by walking backward, and that she had done it the other way round for once. "Your Grace, it is the 12th, he said. It is 1 day past the year. You may say whatever you like." "I have 50 shillings, said Hester Crowle. "I know it. I paid it." "St. Ninian's has a stone floor and a north aisle and no stove," she said, "and it has not had one since it was built. And there is a man in Bidcombe who will put a close stove into the north aisle and 30 feet of pipe for 47 shillings and 6 pence, and I have been to see him, and I am going to give the money to the churchwardens on Sunday, and I am going to tell them out loud in front of the whole parish exactly who it is for and exactly why, and there is nothing whatever you can do to stop me. Because I am a ratepayer's servant with 50 shillings of my own, and I am settled in this parish, and I am not obliged to be quiet about anything ever again." He stood in the bay with the frost coming off the boards behind him. "That is not a number," he said. "No, you have been saving that up." "Since day 328, said Hester Crowle. It was the thing I was not allowed to say. He put the hemp down on the trestle himself this time, which is not how it is done, and worked the hand into it and said, at 3 feet, in the only voice he had, then say the rest of it. And she did, and nobody in the parish of Nether Wrenhale ever heard a word of what was said in that bay at 7 in the morning on the 12th of November, 1801. And the only 2 people who could have told them never did. It was not a long conversation. It did not need to be. They had had 365 days of it already, 8 feet apart, in front of a witness, about hemp. Behind them the walk ran away west into its own length with the sun coming up along it, 220 feet of level oak floor laid on a bank that a man had drained and rolled for 2 years before he trusted it. And by the end of that week there were 3 wheels turning on it again, and 11 spinners walking backward down it at 14 seconds to the pair of posts, paying the fibber out through their fingers, watching the work come toward them, making the only thing in England that is required to be pulled out of shape and then to come back to the mark, and to go on doing it, under load for 6 years, in the cold, over a shaft, with 40 men on the end of it.